Let's discuss with MS Now national security and intel analyst, former FBI assistant special agent in charge, Michael Feinberg, New York Times chief White House correspondent, Peter Baker, MS Now political analyst and Fast Politics host, Molly Jong-Fast, and our senior national security reporter, David Rohde. It is good to see you all. David, why was this Pulte-Clayton handover so messy?
We don't know. And that's the, I think, concerning thing about this. It's been so secretive. What was Pulte doing? I'm just asking sources now if they've heard anything about this. And then separately, we just got this announcement this morning. So when Tulsi Gabbard was sworn in as the Director of National Intelligence, there was a ceremony in the Oval Office. It was all televised. Lindsay Pipia, one of our great White House producers, has asked the White House who swore in, just so we know, was it in the Oval Office? Who swore him into office? Clayton. No answer. And then you flagged the big thing here, and others will speak about it, but I think Jay Clayton will come under immediate pressure to release documents and support the president's false claims about 2020, and more importantly, possibly make false claims about the midterm elections, that they're going to be stolen, that Venezuela or China is somehow going to hack voting machines. There's no evidence that happened in the past or will happen in the future.
Peter Baker, do you have an understanding, based on your conversation with folks inside the White House, of what exactly Jay Clayton's mandate is here?
Well, I think Dave's got it right. I mean, I think that, what's fascinating is the Director of National Intelligence is supposed to be focused on threats to the United States externally, right? That's the traditional idea. This was created in the aftermath of 9/11 to prevent another terrorist attack. And we are at the moment, at war with Iran. And we now see evidence that there are Iranian cyber attacks on American water systems. And yet to Trump, this DNI has been a political outpost for relitigating the 2020 election and perhaps setting a predicate for challenging the 2026 elections, as David talked about. That's not traditionally been the role here, but it does seem to be the role that Donald Trump wants Jay Clayton to play.
Michael Feinberg, what is the cost to American safety and security if the folks at DNI are focused on elections rather than external threats?
It's difficult to say. I mean, the threat is obviously substantial. The DNI oversees the entire intelligence community, which is about 12.5 different agencies with specific capabilities and mission sets. And you want that individual focused with laser-like precision on making sure that the intelligence from that entire community that the president needs to hear, needs to know about, is making its way to the White House. And equally important, you need to make sure that everything is being coordinated. Agencies aren't stepping on each other's toes. The CIA is not running a mission that is going to negatively impact NSA's equities, and NSA isn't doing something that's going to mess up a defense intelligence agency operation. You're really playing puppet master or conductor for a huge community with tens of thousands of employees. And if you're focused on political errands and political conspiracies, you're by definition not doing that. But at the same time,
yep. Go ahead. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah, it is a relatively administrative role. ODNI does not have what you would call operators, people actually in the field doing the dangerous, tough stuff. That is other agencies. But let's not forget, those agencies have likewise been decimated and politicized. So I think we're at a very dangerous inflection point. And the fact that nobody seems to be paying attention that Minnesota's water supply was supposedly hacked is concerning. That's the sort of thing that the intelligence community, when it's firing on all cylinders, is supposed to be preventing.
I'm sorry, Michael Feinberg. There's a certain Michael Feinberg dramatic pause that I have never quite mastered in trying to move along the conversation, but I'm going to get there. Molly, listen, this is a president that campaigned on safety and security, an end to chaos, which he almost exclusively defined as what was happening at the U.S.-Mexico border. It is impossible for me not to metabolize this storyline through that lens, and I wonder how Democrats begin to message that as they move into midterms. Listen, one of the promises promises, one of the many broken promises this guy made was he was going to make your country safer, more secure. He has, in fact, taken his eye off the ball.
Well, and I also think it's important to remember that Jay Clayton would have been not a bipartisan nomination, a bipartisan vote. He would have gotten Democratic votes had it not been for his refusal to say that Donald Trump had lost the 2020 election. So it is yet again, we see a moment where Donald Trump sort of reality has trumped actual reality. And that's been true for one of his nominees. And I think that's really important. And that should be played on a loop. This idea that you cannot get a job in Donald Trump's administration unless you buy into Donald Trump's reality.
Peter, so much of this, as we said in the intro, it is about midterms. Republicans are bracing for losses in November. So Trump is preemptively trying to cast doubt on the results of those elections or seeking to outright take over the elections. As you know, he is now 0 for 19 in court trying to obtain state voter rolls. What would Trump do with those voter rolls? And if he can't get them, what then becomes the administration's plan B?
Well, that's a really good question. And he's not going to get these voter rolls. Doesn't look like even some Republican states have been unhappy with the idea of the federal government taking these voter rolls because these are supposed to be run by states. Elections are run in our country by states and localities, not by the federal government. But, there's been all sorts of suspicions about what they want to do with the rolls. They want to try to find ways to disqualify some people that they say are not legal voters. You heard him talk in that speech, that Oval Office speech a few nights ago, or I guess it wasn't the Oval Office, but at the White House speech in prime time a few nights ago about how he says there were, massive numbers of illegal voters on the rolls. There's been no documentation of that. There's a real concern about the different ways he might go about doing this. You're right to say he did say in an interview a number of months back that he thought the federal government should take over elections in a number of states. He even gave a specific number. I think it was 15. It makes you wonder what he has in mind there specifically. There has been concern that, that the ICE agents would be used at polling stations to deter voting. He has obviously pushed the Senate to pass legislation that would make it harder for people to vote, particularly in mail-in voting. He's got this executive order that's right now once again before the Supreme Court. He is hitting on all fronts. And I think that the concern among Democrats and at least some Republicans is what is he going to do if, in fact, none of that succeeds in, creating an outcome that he wants to see.
Right, because, David, the outcome is what he is interested in, not the process itself. The New Yorker points out the DNI, so Jay Clayton, must start providing the congressional intelligence committees with formal written assessments of potential election threats at least 180 days before federal elections. That report has not been filed. We are 92 days out. Why is Trump so focused on exposing foreign interference but ignoring this clearly mandated step that he signed into law? He was the one who was supposedly so concerned about this.
Yes, and he also created the CISA. That's an infrastructure. It protects infrastructure in the country, such as water facilities. I want to point out, it's not just Minnesota. There's more than a half dozen states. New Jersey was hacked as well, which I know you will.
Has the president blamed New Jersey yet? I mean,
no.
because that is what we watched. That instead of him choosing to focus on Iran and foreign actors, he went ahead last week and blamed Minnesota.
Correct. And then this is the issue, is that, and as Peter said, this is an office that was created for foreign threats. And what's so unusual here, and the thing that alarmed me most at Jay Clayton's hearing was the simple question was, would he obey the order that Tulsi Gabbard carried out last year? Would he go to an election site and try to confiscate election records? That is what she did. There were 2020 election records in Fulton County, Georgia. And when Jay Clayton was asked that question, if the president or the White House chief of staff asks you to do that, will you do it? And his answer was, I haven't really thought about it. And he was asked a follow-up. In your preparations for this hearing, this was Mark Warner, who's known him for years, you are going to be the director of national intelligence. You are going to, and your predecessor was asked to do this and did it. Would you do it? And the answer again was, well, I just haven't really thought about it.
It's keeping you and me and our viewers up at night, but somehow the person who'd be in charge of executing it just hasn't thought about it, Peter. It's absurd. You have the president talking about how he doesn't want to be a modern Herbert Hoover. This is like a new obsession. We're hearing about Herbert Hoover all the time. But Richard Nixon has now entered the chat. Your recent piece points out Trump's polling has hit a modern low. At this point in a second term, only Nixon, racked by Watergate, was more unpopular than Trump is now. This morning, Trump posted, quote, "My real polling numbers are the best they have ever been." What's he talking about, Peter?
Well, nobody knows except for him. As Molly says, he creates his own reality, right? He says the polls are high, therefore they must be high. He says there was vandalism at the reflecting pool, therefore there must have been vandalism at the reflecting pool. He says Tim Walz is responsible for cyber attacking his own water facilities, therefore it's Tim Walz and not Iran. We see this all the time. He declares something to be true, and it doesn't matter that even his own administration says it's not, right? Jeanine Shapiro is no soft liberal woke prosecutor. She is his handpicked, politically active supporter who is in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the District of Columbia. And she went to court saying, actually, no, the reflecting pool was not damaged by this former Olympic swimmer. It's damaged by, a botched job by the people hired to fix it, and then the president come out and says, no, that's not true. I don't believe that is still vandalism, even though the facts are exactly opposite. So there are no polls out there showing that his numbers are at the highest they've ever been. Now, you can say polls don't matter. You can say polls are wrong, but there are no polls saying that his support is the highest it's ever been. In fact, according to the a number of polls from CNN, AP, Quinnipiac, these are all respected surveyors, he is at the lowest stage of any president at this point of a second term, as we said, except for Nixon, who is at this point in his term about to resign.